Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back to our Honors Lecture Series. As you know, last week concluded our series on veterans. What remains of our semester we devote to special presentations, one today having to do with fellowships and scholarships, and the final two featuring presentations by some of our very own honor students who will share with you their experiences researching and writing or performing or creating their honors theses. And so we've got much to look forward to in the coming weeks. My name is Dr. Philip Phillips, and I'm the Associate Dean of the University Honors College, and I'm pleased to welcome all of you here today and those of you who are watching on television. At this time, I would like to invite our Dean, Dr. John Weil, to take the stage, and he will introduce our speaker.
Thank you. So when I told Dr. Phillips that I want to attend today, and I said something to Laura, they said, "You've already heard this a dozen times," and I said, "Yes, of course I have, but I want to emphasize to you how important I think this is." I just got back, as did Dr. Phillips, from the National Honors Collegiate, I always mess it up, NCHCs, the National Honors Group, and I am on what's called the Major Fellowship Committee. So I get to talk to people all over the country who have, undergraduate fellowship offices and who don't. And one of the things that I found is a lot of them don't. There are a lot of colleges where if you want a Goldwater Fellowship, you got to find somebody on your own somewhere in science. Or if you're interested in Fulbright, you hope to find a Fulbright scholar on campus who's been abroad and will help you with it. Whereas here, Laura Clippard heads up, in addition to serving as an advisor and a recruiter, she also heads our Undergraduate Fellowship Office. Real easy to remember, UFO. And we have had really an amazing record of success since she's been here. She was actually, I became dean in July of 2008, and she was the first hire under my watch. And it was a collective decision. It was a good decision. In the time that she's been here, in the last 6 years, we have had one or more Fulbrights each year. So we've had 13 Fulbrights in the last 6 years. In the last 5 years, we've had one or more students each year who got an honorable mention or a Goldwater Award, and that's for you folks that are in science. We've had students who've done critical language scholarships in China, in other parts of the world. We've had a Rhodes finalist. Today and tomorrow we have 2 students who are Marshall finalists, which is one of the top fellowships given to students who are interested in study in Great Britain. We have had, as you're going to hear in just a little bit, we've had a good record with what are known as REUs. If you're in science and you're beyond probably, well, if you've had at least a year here, and especially 2, you need to be looking either at an internship or at one of these research experiences for undergraduates. And we're willing to take help from anybody on campus. We're not trying to usurp anybody else's job, but we will help any department or any student in honors or not, graduate or not, who is interested in getting a graduate fellowship. And Laura knows these probably, she knows them far better than I do. Each of us have a little bit of wisdom. I would encourage you, if you haven't already done so, I think most freshmen, when they come in, we try to give you a little questionnaire. Is that right, Laura? We give you a questionnaire, and it may seem a little intrusive, but we want to know your major. We want to know if you're interested in the environment because we know of scholarships in that area. We want to know if you're interested in public service because we know there's a Truman Fellowship there. So we are literally tracking you from the minute you get in the Honors College and sometimes before. I'm on the Honors Transfer Committee. Dr. Phillips is on the Buchanan Fellowship Committee. And one of the things that we are looking for is who might be our first Rhodes Scholar, who might be our next Goldwater Fellow, who looks like, who's already been studied abroad and has an interest in studying abroad, might be our next Fulbright or Critical Language Scholarship or whatever. So I think Laura actually has a student that's going to go before her, but just trust me, if you find out about a scholarship, you're not likely to find scholarships of national import that we don't know about, but if you find them, we'll help you with them. If you can't find them, Laura is probably as good a resource as you're going to find on any campus for identifying what scholarships might be appropriate to you. So I'm going to turn the floor over to her.
I'm really excited to be here today. I love working with fellowships. It's very exciting, and we have great students here. Before I start in talking about specifics with fellowships, I'd like to introduce a student who has won 2 national opportunities. Her name is Michelle Kelly, and I asked her to share some of her experiences. I had a student recently applied for a fellowship who said Michelle encouraged them with her talk. So I want to just let her share.
Like Ms. Clippard said, my name is Michelle Kelly. I'm a senior at Buchanan. I'm a physics major, but I won't graduate until December 16. I just wanted to share with you a little about what I've applied for, how that went, and why you should apply. So my freshman year, I applied for the UK Fulbright program, which is for undergraduates, not like the normal one. My sophomore year, I applied to the Gilman, and this past summer, I applied for REUs. Just a little bit about the application process in general. The application takes time to put in the commitment to do it right, but it's very manageable if you start early and you get help from wonderful people like Ms. Clippard. They want to help you. They want to help you win these things. The first application process is definitely the hardest. When I was a freshman going through the UK Fulbright application, I had no idea what I was doing. I didn't know how to write a personal statement or how to sell myself to this committee. Though the applications are never quite the same going from the UK Fulbright to the Gilman to RUs, you learn the same skills of how to sell yourself to a committee. I think that's one of the most important things you gain, even if you don't, per se, get this scholarship, is you learn how to sell yourself. And that's important as I'm looking towards graduate schools and future employers. And another thing is that once you get one scholarship or fellowship, even though you may feel like it's small in comparison, it helps you get another because that goes on your resume, and when you're sending your resume off to committees, they see that and they recognize that and they want you to come and be a part of their program. So I'll talk a little bit about the 2 different things that I did receive. So 2 summers ago, between my sophomore and junior year, I studied abroad in Prague in the Czech Republic through the Gilman. I spent 10 weeks there. I was able to take 6 hours for credit, so I was able to get ahead academically. You can do that during the summer. I took a gen ed and did like a transfer credit type thing and did the honors interdisciplinary credit. I also took 2 hours of Czech language, which was really intimidating at first, but I really, really loved it. I think it was one of my favorite parts. I was able to travel to Budapest, Vienna, Dresden, Krakow, Auschwitz, Birkenau, Bratislava, and around the Czech Republic, whereas before I had never even been outside the southern U.S. So, and the amazing thing was I didn't have to pay for any of it because I had the Gilman, I had a scholarship through the Honors College, and I also had a scholarship through the Education Abroad office. This past summer, I just got back from Paris, where I was doing research through an REU, a research experience for undergraduate, and most of those are domestic around different universities in the States, but some of them are international, and you just have to check for that. So I went for training for 3 days at the University of Michigan in Ann Arbor, and then I was sent off to Paris for 10 weeks with 11 other physics undergraduates. My flight was paid for and booked for me. I had free food and housing, and I also got a $5,000 stipend, which is the same as if you or to do an RU in the States. The program was supposed to be in laser and optics, though I ended up being a lab with my mentor, Jacques Robert, and I ended up more of job shadowing him, which I think was a good thing in the end because I learned that I do want to be an experimental physicist. So that was good. So why should you apply? I am a firm believer that you'll never receive something that you do not apply for. So even if it seems really far-fetched, but if you want it, you might as well apply it because nothing bad can come of it. You can only gain more skills that'll help you get another one. There's ways that you can get paid for to travel around the country or out of the country, or even just do it for free. And there's no other time in your life that you're going to be able to go to Prague for 2 months or go to Paris for 2 months and just have a good time and learn things. All these things that you're doing now are great resume builders for applying towards grad school or different employees in the future, because since I have that I'm a Gilman scholar or that I did an REU looking towards grad schools, communities are going to recognize that and know what that means. And I think most importantly that doing things like this can be the experience of a lifetime. I know that some of my fondest memories come from when I was in Prague or when I was in Paris. But if I didn't apply for these things that I felt were so far-fetched, I would never had those opportunities. So if anything that Ms. Clippard is going to talk about interests you, you should go ahead and apply because just good things can come of it. Thank you.
Again, I'm glad to be here. What I like to do with this talk is I like to talk about the scholarships from a general viewpoint. What can you do to make yourself stronger for scholarships? And then I like to dive into some specifics. Now, one thing I should mention to you is this PowerPoint does not cover all the opportunities out there. In fact, some of my students will tell me about opportunities they found on their own, and I will add it to the list. So there's a lot of good opportunities out there. So I would encourage you to talk to faculty. If you hear about good things, to let us know. One of the things that a student needs to do to be competitive for national scholarships is they need to be able to talk about themselves. So I have some papers here that we'll use in a minute, but I would like to make this slightly more interactive than your typical lecture series. So let's start with an honest question, and I promise you won't get struck by a bolt of lightning if you say no. How many of you could email me a resume today if I asked you to? So a lot of people could, okay? And that's good. One of the things that you need to do is you need to be able to keep track of your leadership. There is nothing more difficult than recreating 2 or 3 years worth of leadership activities. So you may not remember what you did your sophomore year. You may not remember that specific leadership role that you were involved with. In terms of how you keep track of it, sticky notes, your phone, a folder, it doesn't really matter. But you need to write down what you do, when you do it, and there's a third component which students typically don't do because they just don't think that way. You need to think about what your role was and what the result was. So we had a student several years ago who helped organize a blood drive. He was in a fraternity, and the result was he increased the numbers from like 30 to 90. That's really big, okay? Or maybe you made phone calls. Or maybe your organization was having some difficulty and you acted as a mediator. So think about what your role is and make sure you record that as well. The other thing you need to do is just talk to advisors and faculty, listen for opportunities. And unfortunately, there's no way around this. How many emails do you guys get a day? Let's raise your hand if it's more, from MTSU. More than 10? Yes? 20? So yeah, Dr. Phillips raised his hand. A lot of good opportunities are communicated through email. There's no way around simply reading your emails, okay? You can take 5 seconds and say, nope, this is not me, or maybe it could be. I send out tons and tons of emails about national opportunities. You would be surprised about the lack of response. Why don't students respond? Because they're busy. But I think part of learning about opportunities is taking the time to read. And I also mentioned grades. You're in the Honors College, so you have good grades, but it's important to keep your grades up, particularly in your major. So why apply? A lot of the fellowships have all these great benefits. I'll go through some in a minute. Free travel, a stipend, professional development. So they have some perks to them. They also look good. As Michelle put it, once you get one fellowship, you're more likely to get another. But there's also some personal benefits. Even if you apply for something and you don't win, if you have to write a personal statement, guess what? When you go to graduate school, you have to do something very similar. So having gone through that process as an undergraduate can help you in terms of getting into graduate school. It can also help you kind of clarify your goals. The common theme in the different fellowship is they don't want to reward you, they want to push you to the next level. They want to recognize your excellence. The applications are so different, and that's one of the things I think Dean Weil mentioned it's done differently all over the country. I think that's one of the things that makes it challenging. I can have a student walk into my office and we can sit down and have a wonderful conversation, and I can say, here's 4 things that you should apply for. I can have another student walk in my office and we can have the same great conversation, but then I don't necessarily identify a specific fellowship for them because the requirements are so specific. Again, it's important to keep the right frame of mind. The fellowships are to basically promote national leadership. It's not a reward, it's an investment. A personal statement. This is probably the most difficult writing that a student has to do. Students will say, oh yes, I'm good with writing a personal statement. I'll say, okay, great, I'm glad to hear it, and then they'll show me their draft and they'll say, I don't know what to write. So I applied for a fellowship myself. Recently, I applied for a Fulbright to South Korea, and I saw the blank sheet of paper, and guess what I did? I did the same thing. I said, I don't know what to write. I have absolutely no idea what to put there. So a personal statement is tough. A personal statement is talking about who you are in relationship to that fellowship. What academic, what intellectual, what external factors have gone into making you that person to apply for that fellowship. Sometimes people talk about their family members. Sometimes they talk about classes. There's no one-size-fits-all answer for this question, which makes it a bit difficult. You have to do deep reflection. So if you want to go to med school, why is that? You didn't wake up one day and say, med school, that's good. You probably put a lot of thought into it and had a lot of experiences that went into that decision. So again, you have to take those out of your head and put them on paper. Letters of recommendation, and I always pick on, I don't know who I should pick on, but if you're a faculty member, what is the shortest time frame that you had in asking for a letter of recommendation? So, anybody want to speak up? Dr. Phillips?
The day of.
The day of, okay. Was it a good letter? It probably was.
I did not write it.
Okay, you did not write it, okay.
I found them the same day.
Okay.
And I try to do good letters, but it's easier to do a good letter if you have longer time.
You can only do a letter in a day if you've done a letter for a student before in the past. You know the student really well and you can modify it. If it's the first time you're writing a letter for a student, it's very difficult to do a letter today to the student.
And most faculty take letter writing very seriously. So this is what you need to do to get that letter. You need to give them a month. You need to tell them what you are applying for. If the scholarship is about leadership, you need to tell them that. So they write about your leadership. You need to give them a resume or a list of activities so that they can do a decent letter. I have seen a lot of letters of recommendation from faculty. And if the faculty doesn't know you very well, it usually will say, Joe is great. He attended class on a regular basis and made an A. That's good. That's too generic. And that's not going to help the student win the application. So you want a faculty member who can say, Joe volunteered outside of class to tutor a student, or Joe did this, or Joe did that. So you want the faculty member to be able to describe examples that apply toward the individual fellowships. And leadership is more than just a resume. So occasionally I'll see a student who's the president or vice president of multiple organizations. It's better to have a focus. It's better to be involved in 1 or 2 organizations than to have 10 on your resume. Again, you're going to have to describe within the fellowship application how you made a difference. And it depends on what the major is. If it's pre-med, maybe it's job shadowing or volunteering at a clinic. But if it's language learning, maybe you participate in the Japanese language table. So you need to be able to connect the fellowship to yourself. And I don't believe in pursuing 20 things. I think it's more important for a student to pursue 1 or 2 things that they truly care about. And a student will say, well, how can I have a better resume? What should I do? And my question is, what do you care about? What interests you? Okay? It's not cookie cutter, it's about you. Grades count. One of the things that you want to do is check the requirements before you start an application. Some of the applications I work with have a GPA requirement. If you don't have that GPA requirement, students will come in and say, well, I don't have that, can I apply? And I'll say, no, it's not my rule, okay? It's the scholarship rule, it's not mine. And I'll say, no, but let's talk about other opportunities. So the first step in applying for a fellowship is to read. Take 30 minutes, take an hour, read the requirements before you jump in. Also, with the fellowships, they're looking for people who can think outside the box. So they're looking for people who can think outside the borders of Tennessee, who are world citizens, who are creative, who are problem solvers. They don't want people who just go to class and go home. They want people who are involved whatever the field is. So some of the tips that I usually work with students and tell them is that you want to have an invisible theme through your application. You want to say, this is what I've done in the past, this is what I'm doing now, and this is why I'm interested. And it's more important to have things of quality than necessarily a long list. Skills that you need. The number one thing that I hear from students, and I experienced myself when I did my own fellowship, gee, I didn't know it would take this long to write, okay? I don't know if Michelle can relate to that or not, but you think, oh, it won't be that bad, and then 6 drafts later, you're still looking at it, okay? So it's really important to get started early. As Michelle said, the earlier you start, the more drafts you can do, the more feedback. When a student brings a fellowship to me 5 days before it's due, I don't tear it apart, okay? They don't have time for me to tear it apart. If they bring it to me 2 months before it's due, then I tear it apart, okay? But tear it apart in a way that helps the students. Is the student answering the question? What's the outline? So we really go in depth. So you have to have strong time management skills. You also have to have good references. And one thing that students struggle with, and I think maybe this is because we're taught in the South to be humble, is you have to kind of have an idea of what your strengths are and how to communicate those to another student. And that's an art, okay? It's not something that we learn naturally in school. So what are you good at? Well, I'm good at public speaking. What's an example of that? Well, I talked last week. How long did you talk? What was the result? So, part of it is to talk about what you've done and why it's important. And I think that's not a natural thing. Sometimes I'll have students ask, their family members or their friends to tell what their strengths are. And then we look at the strengths and then try to come up with examples. The benefits are applying, again, personal growth. Essays, with the Fulbright, we typically have about 6 drafts of essays, so it's important to get started early. I deal with a lot of students that have really difficult lives. Okay, I don't know how else to say that. Difficult backgrounds. They're in foster care. They've had all these things, and they don't know how to talk about them. So typically, if you have that kind of background where you've overcome obstacles, you can talk about it, but you don't want to just talk about it in terms of how difficult it's been. You want to talk about it, and this is what I experienced, and this is what I learned from it. Don't insult the readers. I know that sounds obvious, but you would be surprised how many drafts I get where people say, I really just, this is a Fulbright example, I really just want to help those people overseas. That's very condescending. They don't view themselves that way, okay? So you want to have your essays proofed, and you want to make sure that you get started early. So let's jump in, okay? And this is where your papers. So let me explain the papers. I will cue you, and then I will say, are you interested, okay? So green is very interested. Orange is, I have a friend who's interested. Yellow is, it's kind of like a yellow light. I'm kind of interested. And then you can hold up blue, which is I need to research some other stuff. If you have a question, you can hold a big red one up, okay? And guess what? I'll stop and I'll ask you what your question is. So one thing that I would encourage people to look into, how many of you have heard of the Undergraduate Research Center? Okay, so hopefully by the end of the session, everybody will have heard of it. You, Nick, and you, Bennett, you can get paid for research. You can get paid for a creative project. You do have to apply, okay? This is not through the Honors College. This is through the Undergraduate Research Center. So students that come in and they'll say, I'm struggling with money, and then in the next breath they'll say, but I'm interested in research. I say, I have a solution. You should apply for Eureka. So the Eureka funding ranges from $500 to $3,500. Does anybody win Eureka that's in here want to raise your hand? All right. So we have three. I saw Eureka winners. So basically for Eureka, you have to have a faculty sponsor. You have to have someone to sign off on your project. The $500 level, basically, for the $500 level, you write a 2-page paper and the faculty member signs it. And the faculty member has to agree to supervise your work. The deadlines are ongoing, okay? You can apply for one even now for summer. You can apply one for fall. I think the spring deadline hasn't passed yet. So you can get paid to do a creative project or a research project. So at this point, how many of you would be interested in Eureka? A whole bunch of you, right? Yay. So again, Eureka, you have a question. Yes?
Yeah, what kind of projects do those usually encompass? Because research usually sounds like I'm working in a lab or out in the field someplace. Creative sounds like I'm writing a play or a music album or something.
I'm glad you asked that. There's a wide range of Eureka funding. Dr. Phillips, your student did, sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
Yeah, she's working on a work that bridges philosophy and literature and medicine.
Yeah.
And so her project is principally in the humanities, although she's a pre-med student and planning to go to medical school next year.
The answer is it can be in any area. For creative, it could be music. We had a student who got funded to write fiddles, Appalachian tunes. We had a student who got funded to write a novel. Research could be researching why do students eat chocolate during finals week, although I would think the answer would be very obvious. Or it can be in the humanities area. So research means whatever research means in that field. Yes, sir?
What I would add to that is that there are more in the sciences than in the humanities. And it's been my experience that students who are applying in the humanities face a heavier burden to make the case for their projects. So if you apply for one in the humanities, work closely with the professor who can assist you and offer you advice. We actually need more in the humanities, and I know that many of our students are working in that area. So you may need to explain more because the application is set up in a way that favors science majors.
Okay. Again, the Eureka stuff is open to everybody, and I would encourage you to think about applying. So we're going to talk a little bit about some specific opportunities. The DAAD RISE. Chelsea Harmon, who is a chemistry major, is the last person that did this, and she flew to Germany and did research, paid research all summer. And typically, this is geared toward the sciences. Engineering, biology, earth science are some areas. It's still possible to apply for this, okay? The application is supposed to open December 1st of this year, and it will close in January. So if you are interested in doing research overseas in Germany, you have to look at the database and you have to pick out what areas you want to do the research in. It is competitive, but you won't get it if you don't apply. This is one that a student could typically work over the fall break. So how many of you might be interested in the DAAD? Yay! Michelle, yay! So if you are, my email is at the beginning and I'm also upstairs. Let me know because this is an active application we can start working on. The Boren. A lot of the fellowships are geared towards studying abroad, and definitely the Boren is. So basically, the Boren Fellowship is $20,000 for overseas. It has a lot of stipulations attached to it, which makes it somewhat tricky for people to apply for. They want someone who's interested in national security. National security doesn't just mean guns, though, or weapons. It can also mean that the student is interested in anything that affects issues such as water insecurity, food insecurity, health care, education for women. For the Boren, you have to write an application that is geared around one of these issues. In addition to that, and this is kind of where I lose a lot of students, you have to agree for every year that you get the $20,000 that you will work for the federal government for 1 year. Okay? So and people go, oh, well, I'm not interested in working for the federal government. But if you are interested in working for the federal government, they also like students to learn languages overseas. So if you're interested in Arabic or Korean or some of the less common languages, you might be it might be a good opportunity. The CLS, it is open now. It is due Monday, okay? So if you decide you're interested in it, you're going to have to rush. The CLS basically teaches these languages. It's 8 weeks overseas, everything paid for. Some languages require a background. So in order to apply for Chinese, for example, you have to have taken some Chinese classes. Now, one thing you have to be able to do with this is you have to be able to tie it to your long-term goals. Long-term goals are very flexible. So, for example, you could be interested in learning Hindi because you want to work in Bollywood, okay? So it doesn't have to be science-oriented. It can be arts-oriented. It can be business. You want to learn Japanese because you want to be a business person. It pays for a lot of stuff, and again, they want the student to tie it to their long-term goal. So how many of you might be interested in the CLS? This is where you have to hold your cards up. Oh, you are? It's open to a few of you? Okay. The Gilman. Michelle was a Gilman winner. The Gilman tries to encourage diverse students to go to diverse places, but they define diversity very broadly. Okay, so for example, diversity could be that you were raised on a farm, or diversity can be other factors. The Gilman, you have to be receiving the Pell Grant, and the Gilman is eligible for any country, but they prefer countries outside of Western Europe. And they prefer that you do an internship or language training. So let me just throw out some Gilman things that you could apply for. There's a Japanese program that is 4 weeks that's going to be offered. That would be a great Gilman opportunity. So there's the study abroad, if you want to jot this down. The study abroad fair is Wednesday from 10 to 2, and I would encourage you to attend that. But the Gilman is a great program. The Fulbright is probably my favorite program because the first time I read my Fulbright manual, it said, the purpose of the Fulbright is world peace. So the purpose of the Fulbright is to promote goodwill between countries. You can either teach English overseas or you can do a research project overseas, and it pays, it's usually 8 to 10 months, and we have had 2 Fulbright winners last year, and we've had multiple winners. So we have a pretty good track record, and we really support our students in this endeavor. So basically, they're looking for people who are open-minded. Every country gets to set their requirements. So if you want to go to Spain, the requirements are going to look different than if you want to go to Bulgaria. So in Spain, you have to have proficiency in the language. Bulgaria, you do not. If you go to South Korea, they want you to be under age 30. But that's the only country that I know of that has a specific age requirement. So each country kind of gets to outline what they want to do. For the Fulbright, I will hold a lot of Fulbright workshops and drop-in events next semester. If you are interested in learning more, I encourage you to follow up with me about it. It is a wonderful program, and its purpose is very noble. How many of you might be interested in the Fulbright? Oh, yay, green, lots of green. Oh, these are some of the things it pays for. Airfare, insurance. Sometimes, I don't know if anybody is married or has children, sometimes you can bring people with you. For example, Germany allows you to bring spouse or children and actually pays for them. So every Fulbright country is a little bit different. The Truman is really interesting, really quirky. The Truman, I'm looking for someone who is argumentative, okay? Someone who has a lot of things that bother them about our society and they want to change them, okay? And here's the but they've actively gone out and started working on this. For the Truman, it is $30,000 for graduate school. It's a really, really long application. You have to be a junior, and they look for people who want to be a change agent, meaning that they want to change things in our society, and they look for people who are active in community, in campus, and in government. So it's very difficult. We actually have not had a Truman winner. We've had 2 Truman finalists, but not a winner. A good candidate for the Truman is someone who has leadership and is out there. Basically, what I look for someone who can tell me what bothers them and has gone out and actively done something about that. But they're looking for someone who is committed. For the Truman, some of these have work requirements. You have to agree to work for a nonprofit for at least 3 of 7 years following graduate schools. Nonprofit could be a high school, could be a college, could be the American Red Cross, so they're pretty flexible with that. So how many of you might be interested in the Truman? Okay. The Goldwater, Dean Weil mentioned this one. The Goldwater is very specific, and they want people who are interested in research as a professional career. So I have great pre-med students. I have wonderful pre-med students. But the Goldwater doesn't want to fund pre-med. They want to fund people who are planning to be scientists, whether it's in mathematics or engineering or science. For the Goldwater, it really helps to have previous research experience because you have to write a very scientific essay to explain what your interests are. For the REUs, now I love the REUs. You had a question, yes ma'am?
I had a question about the Goldwater. Would they allow someone to apply who's pursuing an MD PhD?
Possibly. You have to be able to justify it. Like you have to be able to explain why you need an MD PhD program and why not just a PhD.
We got an honorable mention.
We got an honorable mention, yes, we did. For the REUs are they're sponsored by the National Science Foundation, and basically they pay between $4,000 and $7,000. That's what Michelle did. They fund your study overseas, and it's a good experience to work with a team. You work with typically about 10 students to gain research experience. So how many of you might be interested in either Goldwater or an REU? Okay, I want to mention all of the opportunities are not up here. There's something called a MERT, okay, and what the heck is a MERT? A MERT is the opportunity to do health research overseas. They have 22 locations. They look for diverse students. Diversity can be more than just race. It can also be people who are in rural environments or who are low income. So there's a lot of other opportunities as well. The Hertz Foundation is for someone who wants to work, get a PhD, and they have a practical problem they're working on. So I think a practical problem would be to solve sanitation issues overseas. They also need to be available to help the government in a case of national emergency. There's also quite a few science fellowships that can help pay for graduate school. The NSF is about $30,000, and those are the areas listed there. And basically they fund 3 years and they give you a stipend. What we've heard about these is most students don't win them as they're graduating. You can apply both as a graduating senior and in graduate school your first year. So the people that are winning these are typically graduate students. We had a student who did win it, but she was already in graduate school, and that was Mary Hayden. Now we have had a student win this one. This is the National Defense, and it pays for graduate school. And the National Defense, the areas are tied to areas related to national defense in terms of the research. And it has very similar type of opportunities. And I just want to mention Phi Kappa Phi. It's not on the slide. Again, not all of them are up here. We have a very strong Phi Kappa Phi chapter, and we have had students win $5,000 to help pay for graduate school. So in terms of opportunities, there's more than just one. What I usually encourage students to do is, if they want to talk to me about fellowships, I have a form that they fill out, and then I ask them to give me a resume, because sometimes just in passing, I might not think of an opportunity for a student. The Udall is a scholarship that helps pay for your undergraduate, and they are looking for people who are interested in public policy in Native American healthcare or environmental issues. Now, these are kind of related, the Marshall and the Rhodes, in that they're both in the UK and they're both competitive. What we have learned over the years about these is when not only do they want letter writers, but they want letter writers outside of MTSU. So the students that applied for the Marshall and that are interviewing, 2 of their 4 letters came from people outside of MTSU. So how the heck do you get a letter outside of MTSU from a faculty member? Well, one is an REU, or perhaps a Gilman, or a study abroad, or an internship. So in order to be competitive for these, they want people outside of MTSU to write the letters, and there's a lot of essay writing involved. Some of these have age requirements. You have to be under age 25, and both of these pay for 2 years overseas. Basically what I tell students, and it's really hard not to do this, it's easy to say this, is if you apply, you put a whole lot of hard work into this and you don't win, try not to take it personally, okay? It doesn't mean that your application was bad. It probably means that it was very, very competitive and that only a certain number of people can win. And that's why we try to make the process a learning vehicle. So you learn how to write a personal statement and you learn about different opportunities. So I think there's value in the process. So I think I'd like to invite Michelle to come back, okay? Because I'm looking at our time. We end at 5 till? Okay. So I think at this point, and I didn't have you hold your cards up, so you still have a chance to ask questions. If you'd like to ask a question, you can ask Michelle as a student, or if you want to ask me, I think I'll take a few questions now.
Let me point out, I brought up, we've been trying to keep track of our national winners. So we brought our plaques that'll take us through the last 6 or 8 years, and almost all of these scholarships we've gotten winners. So, you know, if you're interested in following up, some of you may know the students who got it.
Oh, my mic? Yes.
Michelle, there's living overseas and then there's living overseas. Tell us a little bit about your experience as far as your housing, logistics, and quality of life that you live with.
Between Prague and Paris, they were pretty different, but both had really great public transportation systems, so that helped out. When I was in Prague, I went through a study abroad program provider, so I was housed with other students from the U.S. in an apartment. Kind of the same thing going with Paris. I was housed they have several universities throughout Paris, and all their housing is together at Cité Universitaire. And so I was housed with a bunch of other students in more dorm type living, though since it was the summer term, there weren't a lot of French students there.
Yes.
Is the Fulbright
Can you apply for that when you go to undergraduate school too, or is that only for undergraduate?
That is a great question. I am so glad you asked that. I love the Fulbright, and one of the reasons I like it is because it has flexibility. The first time you can apply for it is when you are a junior getting ready to graduate. But in theory, you could leave MTSU, work for 5 years, and then come back and apply for the Fulbright. You can also apply for the Fulbright when you're in your master's program or PhD program. Now, if you're at another university, you would apply with them, not me, okay? But you can still apply. When you get your PhD, you flip into the other category and you can apply for a faculty Fulbright. So the Fulbright has a lot of professional opportunities, and it's one that students, even if they can't do it right now, they can do it later.
Would you be able to start the application and just keep working on it and making it better until
Well,
you take that too early? Because I'm a junior now, so if I want to go right after I graduate, before
if you wanted to go right after you graduate, I'm assuming you're graduating in 17. So the Fulbright would open up this year, March of 2016, and it closes in October. So during that time frame, you would work on your application for that next year. So you apply about a year early. And I definitely am interested in talking to students about the Fulbright, so just shoot me an email. Yes, sir.
I have a two-part question. One, for all of these fellowship opportunities and you struggle with students, are you able to receive study abroad, college credit, or time credit?
It depends. If it's through the study abroad office, then yes. For example, through the Gilman and the Boren are part of the education abroad office. Now for the CLS, for example, you can receive credit, but it's not through the study abroad office. So the answer is it just depends.
To kind of follow up on that, I'm part of the RTC program, so obviously with that program, you get to be on campus for fall and spring semesters, and the summer semester is usually full of training. And so we have a particular program called the CULT program, which is the Cultural Understanding and Language Assistance.
Okay, great.
And so I didn't know if there would be coordination between maybe the RTC office and the city of our office. We're supposed to utilize that opportunity. The RTC gets to still develop some type of college credit while engaging in the cultural understanding that having the students through that program.
The answer is I don't know, okay? And that's what I tell students when they ask me a question and I don't know. I think the study abroad fair is Wednesday, and I think that would be a really good opportunity if you have a chance to go over there and ask them that question directly. Did you get college credit for your REU?
Not my REU, that just went on my resume and looks really good, but for my Gilman, I was able to take 6 hours for credit. So it just depends program to program.
And if I can answer, it sounds like it's a good program, whether you get college credit for it or not.
Right.
I mean, anytime you can go abroad and have somebody pay for you to learn a foreign language, that's like having money in the bank.
Great question, thank you. Other questions? Yes, sir.
I'd like to comment about, I think, the board comment you made about the working with the federal government.
Yes.
I'll toss in this comment, but after I retired from the military, I then spent 5 years working for the federal government in a different job, and I thought don't be put off by, I thought of what it's like working for the federal government. They have awesome benefits.
Yeah.
And it's a great job.
And there's a lot of different opportunities. I mean, there's a lot of different branches. We have a student who applied for the Boren, and she did get it, and she's interested in working for the media department, for the State Department. So you looked at me, so I was and like I said, with the Boren, typically people are interested in, I'll say $20,000 helps pay for your study abroad, and then I'll mention the federal government requirement, and people go, no. So,
It was a great job.
yeah. Yes, ma'am.
I just personally know about the Boren, if you want to do Peace Corps, they
Yeah.
allow that to be your work with the program. But of course, I've also asked 2 years, because there's 2 years for 1 and 1. What if you want 2 years, then you can do Peace Corps and start,
Okay. Yeah, that's great. Like I said, there's a lot of flexibility. Other questions?
Thank you.
Okay.